Morning, a good Erev Shabbos. Hope you are well. Hope you had a wonderful week this week. Everyone's feeling good. Today's shiur is the Neshech Our Nachman Shulchan Code whose year was yesterday. Bez Hashem have an aliyah and Shulmor Chav Shepsel Bracha Saras Maleb and Binam Moshe Ben Yosef. Then that Hashem will have an aliyah and for Shalom for Yisrael Barachalea Bracha Bas Pesach Zoda Bracha Liana Bas Yar Bracha Avarisa Berisha. Chavis to the Bela Fushtel B'Sos Sharchel Yisrael and shout out to our good friends at the Imperial Advisory Group for sponsoring this month's shiur. If you are in need of any help from a CFO for your company, please reach out to them directly at imperialgrp.com. Okay, Perek above Metzia is one of the very difficult. Perek is about Ribbis and avak Ribbis, and which means interest. This is the rice about not charging interest, not collecting interest on loans. And the Chachamim were also set up restrictions on transactions that were not technically loans but resembled Ribbis, and it's called avak Ribbis. These were transactions that were done in the times of the Mishnah and are less familiar today, and it is a very, very difficult chapter. So it's a long chapter, it's difficult, and we're going to take a stab at it and do our best. Mishnah, Perek Hey, Mishnah Aleph. With Yad Dishmaya, we will succeed in learning this Perek together. Perek Hey, Mishnah Aleph, Ezu, Neshech, Ezu, Tarbis. What type of interest is Neshech, which is the Esidaraisa? What type of interest is Tarbis, which is a Isidarabana? Neshech means to bite, right? That's like a snake bite almost, and that's the Raisa, and the Derabana is it's called Tarbis, which means to increase. Right, because the borrower is the lender is increasing his money through taking interest, but without taking any product. So what are these types of interests? Ezo Neshech. What is the case of Neshech? Hamal seller b'charish dinarim. Someone who lends a seller, which is a coin that's worth 4 dinars, for 5 dinars. It's lending it on condition that the borrower will pay him 5 dinars in return. It's like a 20% profit. So or he lends 2 saw wheat for 3 saw. Both of these arrangements are Raisa, and they're called Neshech. Who knows? Because the lender takes a bite out of the borrower's funds by taking for him more than he gave. Tarbis, and what's the case of Tarbis? Someone who increases his wealth by way of buying produce or receiving more value than he paid for. If this is done in a way that resembles a loan, it is usher by Din Derabanan. Usually when you buy produce, you buy it through a sale. I buy a bag of apples, I pay for the apples, now I have a sale. But if it's done through a loan, then that's a problem. So, Ketsa. So how does this work? How does it work to buy produce as a loan? For example, someone bought wheat from another person at a price of a gold dinar. Gold dinar is equal to 25 silver dinars for a core for 30 saw of wheat. That was the established price in the market. the buyer paid for the wheat in advance with the understanding that the seller would give him the wheat during the course of the year as needed. That was permissible because wheat at this price is rarely available in the market. In the meantime, the price of wheat increased and it stands at 35 silver dinars per core. If the buyer were to take delivery of the wheat now, there would be no problem with interest because he is viewed as having taken possession of the wheat from the time he paid for it. So it was his wheat that would have been value. So there's always going to be market fluctuation. But if you take the money, if you take the produce at the time that you give the money, then that's a sale. But if you're paying in advance for futures and you're not going to take the produce for another 6 months from now, then that is a shtick or ribbis. That is ribbis. The price go up or down. Even though the price today was the price you agreed upon. By the time you take possession of the produce, that's going to be the price is going to change. Amallah, the buyer now says to the seller, give me my wheat. Shani Russell, the I want to sell it and buy wine with the money that I get from it. Amallah, the seller says to the buyer, instead of taking the wheat and selling it to buy wine, let your wheat that I owe you be considered a debt of 30 dinars upon me. You will now have a right to receive from me wine worth the amount that I now owe you for the wheat. However, the seller does not have any wine right now. He is also not receiving any new money from the buyer with which to buy the wine. Therefore, even if wine is available on the market at an established price, the seller could not be considered to have wine in his possession. Since the seller does not have wine, the buyer could not be viewed as acquiring wine from him at this time. Therefore, if the price of the wine goes up between the time that he makes the new agreement and the time that the wine is delivered, the buyer will be receiving something from the seller that is worth more than what he was owed. The arrangement is therefore also derabbanan. Mishnah Beis. Hamal v'es chaveiro, someone who gives a loan to his friend, lo yader v'chatzero chinam, should not live in the borrower's courtyard for free without paying rent. Lo yiskor imenu b'pachos. No, may he rent it from him for less than the usual rate. And Neshech Ribbis, because that is then their banana of Ribbis. Allowing the lender to live in the house for free or for less than the going rate is a gift to the lender. That the borrower gives him this in addition to repaying the loan, it is interest. However, since the loan was not made a condition that the borrower would give his benefit to the lender, it is usher within their banana. Only interest that is made in part, it was made part of the original loan agreement, is a dinder reso. Unless, of course, your loan is being paid by the fact that you're giving him rent. Unless there's a story. They lend you money, but not need a place to live. So if that's going to be considered to be loan repayment, then that's different. You can't give him cash plus a place to live at a discount. Mar bin al hasachar. It is permissible to increase the amount of rent a person charges someone who does not pay in advance. Mar bin al hamecher. But it is not permissible to increase the price the person charges for a sale to the buyer who does not pay up front. As Kate said, how so? His kilo is chatzero. Someone rents his courtyard to another person. He says to him, if you give me the rent for the entire year now, that's just a lie in Lashana. It is yours for 10 seller for the year. But if you pay me for it month by month, then I give it to you at 1 seller per month. What was 12 seller for the year? Mutter, it is allowed, since rent is what we do at the end of each month. The true price is 12 seller. And the landlord's offer of 10 seller for the year is a discount for getting paid in advance rather than a charge with waiting to get paid. However, if someone sells his field to another person, he says to him, if you give me the money for the field now, it is yours for 1,000 zuz. But if you want to delay paying me until the threshing time, when the grain from the field can be sold, so you can raise money to pay me. Then it is yours for 12 mana, 1,200 zuz. Usser, that is usser, since money for a sale is due as soon as the sale takes effect. The true price for the field is 1,000 zuz, and the man for 1,200 zuz is a charge for waiting to get paid. That is a derabanan of that is Ribbis. That is Ribbis derabanan. Mishnah Gimel. Machalo esasada. If someone sells a field to another person, no, someone makes us damim, and the buyer gives the seller part of the money, and the seller says to him, whenever you want, bring the rest of the money and take what is yours. And it'll be considered yours from now. And if you do not bring the rest of the money, the sale will be nullified, and I will return your money to you. Usser, that is usser, for either the buyer or the seller to take the crops of the field until we see what happens. This is because it might result in the form of a ribbis derabanan. If the field ends up belonging to the buyer, then any produce taken by the seller while he was waiting for the final payment is a benefit he is getting in return for waiting for his money. If the field ends up staying with the seller, then any produce taken by the buyer while the sale is still pending is a benefit he is getting for letting the seller use the money of the first payment while the sale was still pending. Either way, it's a problem. The next case, Hovahu al Sadeh. Someone lends another person money on the security of his field, meaning that if the borrower does not repay the loan, the lender can take the field. Amalo, and the lender said to the borrower, if you do not give me back the money within the next 3 years, hare he shali, and the field is mine as of now. Hare he shalo. Then, if the borrower does not pay back within 3 years, the field is the lender's. That's mutter, even if the field is worth more than the loan, because the lender actually owned the field from the moment he gave the borrower the money. I mean, it was mortgaged. This means that the money he gave the borrower was never really a loan, but a payment for the field. He simply bought the field at a cheap price. And this is what Baisus, the son of Zonin, would do with the approval of the Chachamim. He basically would like mortgage the properties and take ownership of the mortgages on the properties until the loans are repaid. Okay, now, one may not have a storekeeper sit and sell produce in exchange for half of the earnings. One may not tell the storekeeper, here is produce at a certain price, sell for a higher price, and we will split the profits. Nor may you give a storekeeper money with which to buy produce to sell in exchange for half of the earnings. Unless one also gives the storekeeper his wages as a worker, because half the produce is a loan from the investor to the storekeeper, and the other half is money that belongs to the investor. Since the storekeeper is an equal partner with the investor in this deal, and he is doing all the work, I'm here for both of them. If he does not get paid for half his work, it is because he's performing a free service of the investor in exchange for the loan he received from him. This free service is an issur of Ribbis. The investor must therefore pay the storekeeper for half of his work. The Metzia. One may not give eggs to a farmer to have his hens sit on them in order to hatch chicks, which he will then raise for half the profits and losses. The ain't shaman agalim is sayachin the mechsa. Normally, one assess the value of calves or colts and give them to a herdsman to raise for half the profits and losses. Unless the investor gives the farmer or herdsman payment for his work, and raising the investor's half of the animals and for half his food that he feeds the animals, provided that the work of food provided the work for free is also there. But as Ribbis. However, herdsmen may accept calves or colts for half the profits without first assessing the value, in which case he is not responsible for half the losses. If so, he is not receiving any of the animals as a loan. He is simply caring for the owner's animals in exchange for half the profits. Therefore, there is no need to pay him for his work or the feed. Umegadlin o son ad shiur mishalashim. He must raise the calves and colts until they are grown to a third of the full size before he can return them and split the profits with the investor. The chamor I should take to enes. If the agreement was to raise a young donkey, he must raise it until it can carry a load. Mishnah Hey. Okay. Shamin para chamor v'chol darish osav el chol lemeksa. One may assess the value of a grown cow, a grown donkey, or any other animal that does work and thereby covers the expense of what it eats, and place it in the care of a herdsman for half the profits and losses. Since the herdsman can use these animals for work, this is considered his payment for taking care of and feeding the animals. Malcolm Shanago Lachluk Esavlados Yad, in the place for the customers to divide the offspring immediately as soon as they no longer need the care of an expert herdsman. Cholkin, they may divide them immediately. Makom Shinagu, the Gadel, in the place for the customers to have the herdsman raise young animals until they've grown. Yigadlu, they may leave the animals with the herdsman to raise until they're grown, and the herdsman cannot force the investor to divide the offspring before them. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, "Shamin egel in imo v'sayach in imo." One may assess the value of a calf along with its mother, or of a colt along with its mother, and give them to a herdsman to raise for half the profits and losses, without having to pay him anything extra for his work and for the food he provides. These expenses are covered by the value of the mother's work and the child's manure. Marfris al Sadeyu, a person may increase the amount he charges for rent on his field in exchange for lending the renter money to improve the quality of the field. And he not be concerned about the extra rent being considered interest, because the increase charged is on account of the improved quality of the field, which can now be expected to produce more. Mishnah Vav. A person may not accept from a fellow Jew an investment of its own with its own Basel arrangement, under which he guarantees to return the amount of the original investment plus half of any profits. With Neshech Ribbis, if the profit in this case is considered interest. One may, however, accept an investment with its own Basel arrangement from non-Jews. Malvin may hand Malvin of son Ribbis. And in fact, one may actually borrow from them and lend to them with interest. The same holds true with a ger toshav. Malvi Yisrael ma'uso a Jew may lend a non-Jew money that he borrowed from a non-Jew to another Jew and charge him interest on it, provided that this is done with the agreement of the non-Jew, who is then considered to be the person lending with interest to the second Jew. But not if this was done only with the agreement of the first Jew, because the first Jew is also considered to be the one lending with interest to the second Jew, and that's a problem. Okay, Mishnah Zion. Oh, okay. Any post going to pay us as Yitzie a shot. We may not sell a price. We may not set a price and pay in advance a produce that the seller does not have yet, until a market price for that type of produce becomes established. Before that time, the seller may not be able to buy the produce for the money he received from the buyer, and he therefore cannot be viewed as having the produce. Yatsa Hashar, once the market price becomes established, we can set a price and pay in advance. Because even though the seller does not yet have the produce, the that that if the other person does have it. Because the seller can easily buy the produce at the going rate with the money he received from the buyer, we consider it as if he is already has the produce when the buyer pays him in advance. If the seller was the first of the harvesters to bring in his grain and he already has a stack of it waiting to be processed, but there is not yet an established market price for it, posik imo ala kadish, a buyer may not set a price and pay in advance for grain from that stack, even though the grain is not yet ready to be sold. Similarly, he may agree on a price and pay in advance for wine that will be made from a tub of grapes that the seller is prepared to press. And for oil that will be made from a vat of olives that the seller is prepared to press. And for earthenware vessels that will be made from the clay balls that the potter has. And for plaster, once the materials from which it will be made has been put in the furnace. One may set a price and pay in advance for fertilizer all year round, even during the winter time. So although not everyone has that, most people do. Even if the seller does not have it, he can easily buy it from someone else at the price which he is selling it to the buyer. Rabbi Yossi says, "Ein poskin al zevel, al imken haiselo zevel be'ashba." One may not set a price and pay in advance for fertilizer unless the seller has fertilizer in its compost heap, even during the summer. The Chachamim matir paying in advance even the seller does not have fertilizer, only in the summer when everyone has it and it can be bought anywhere. Okay, when postik imo b'kishar hagavoa, the buyer may agree to a price and pay in advance on condition that the price of the produce goes down. The seller will give it to him for the better price. Yehuda says, even if the buyer did not agree to a price and pay in advance for the produce at the better price, even if he did not make this condition explicitly when he agreed to the original contract, if the price went down, the buyer can still say to him, "Give me the produce at this better price, or usai, or give me back my money." According to Yehuda, every buyer intends intends this when he agrees to an advance contract, and is therefore as if he made the condition explicitly. Mishnah Ches Malva Adam es arisa chitim v'chitim lezera. A person may lend his sharecroppers wheat for wheat. He can give them a certain amount of wheat kernels, and they will later give him back the same amount, provided that the kernels will be used for planting. In that case, the kernels are not viewed as a loan, but as part of the sharecropping agreement. But he may not lend them wheat to eat. He cannot lend them wheat for wheat if it's used for eating, because this is a real loan. And the price of wheat, if the price of wheat goes up, the sharecroppers will be giving back something worth more than they borrowed. Because Rabbi Gamliel would lend his sharecroppers wheat for wheat for the purpose of planting, the yoker, the hostel. And if he gave it to them at a high price, then, and the wheat became cheaper, or if he gave it to them at a lower price, and the wheat became more expensive, and all tell me Kishar he would take the wheat back from them at only the cheaper price because he did not want it to look like he was taking interest. Along with Neshech Shahal, since this was known during the Leal's practice, the time of our Mishnah teaches this is not because the law, because of the halacha, rather, not because, um, right, rather because when the Leal had to do so. Because he wanted to be strict with himself, and but according to the halacha, it is permissible to lend a sharecropper a sa for a sa for a sa for a sa if it'll be used for planting and take back a full sa, whatever the price. Mishnah test. Adam l'chavir. A person may not say to his friend, "Halveini kor chita, lend me a kor of wheat, ani atela l'chag l'gorim." I will give you back a kor of wheat at the threshing time. They answered this due to a concern that the price of wheat might be higher when he is ready to repay the loan. So that giving back a saw of wheat would mean that the borrower is giving back something worth more than he borrowed. However, one may say to his friend, Halveni bini, lend me wheat until my son who has come, who has my wheat comes, or lend me wheat until I find the key to my granary so I can open it and repay you with the wheat I have inside. And Chum did not answer that. If the borrower has the same item in storage, we simply cannot get to it at that moment. That is mutter according to the Chachamim. The Hillel Osa, however, Hillel answers making that loan, even if he has the stuff in stock. In Hillel's opinion, the Chachamim answered lending a sufferer sa in all circumstances with no exceptions. Hillel will also say, "Lo salva isha kikra lechavetar ad shitasena damim." A woman may not lend a loaf of bread to her friend until she makes the loaf into a loan for money, until she fixes the price for the loaf and tells the friend to pay her back the value of the loaf that she borrowed. This is because we are concerned that the price of wheat might go up, and Ribbis. And these women will end up having done a loan with interest. Since the borrower will be paying something worth more than she borrowed, the Chachamim mattered lending a loaf for a loaf because it is something small, and any change in price is likely to be so small that it has to be considered a gift rather than interest given for the loan. Okay, two more to go. Mishnah Yud. Amar Adon Chaver, person may say to his friend, Nakish imi by Nakish imach. Weed my field with today, and I will weed your field with you tomorrow. Ador imi ve'ador imach. Or hoe my field with me today, and I will hoe your field with you tomorrow. So, one person is lending the other day, a day of work. He's being paid back the same type of work, so there's no problem of Ribbis. Lo yamala, but he may not say to her, Nakish imi ve'eda imach. Whoa, be with me today, and I will hold with you tomorrow. Edar imi ve'nakish imach, or hold with me today, and I will be with you tomorrow. The person working on the second day might not repay the loan he cannot repay the loan with different type of work. So it might be harder and more valuable than the work done for him, and that is a derabanan form of ribbis. Call Yemei Grid Echad. All the days of the dry earth season in the summer are viewed as one period, and a person may work for another person on the summer day on condition that he will do the same type of work for him on a summer day. All the days of the rainy season, in the winter, are viewed as one period, and a person may work for another person on a winter day on condition that the second person will do the same type of work for him on a different day during the winter time. Lo yama lo, but he cannot say to the person, Charosh imi agreed, plow with me during the dry season, and I will plow with you during the rainy season because that's it's more difficult during the rainy season than it is in the dry season. That doesn't work. I wonder if someone who loves the summer loves someone who loves the winter, they make an agreement because easier for them to work in their climates. That would have any change in the halacha. I don't know. Gamliel says yes, Ribbis mukdames. There's an issue of paying Ribbis early. Yes, Ribbis maacheres, and there is also an issue of paying late interest. Okay, son, how so? No, son, ain't no lulos himenu. Someone has set his mind on borrowing from another person. I am a shaleach lo amar b'shvil shetaveni, and he sends him gifts and says, "These are for you, so that you will lend me money." Zu he ribis meusav. Zu he ribis mukdas. This is an early interest and is usher. Lezeh hemenu lezeh behechsi lo es meusav. If you borrowed it from him and he give back the money, I am a shalech love amar b'shvil ma melusecha shehayu betelus etzli. And he later sent him gifts and said, "This is to compensate you for the money that was not being used by you while it was by me." Zehi ribis mucheres. This is the late interest, and it is also usher. Shimon says, yes, Ribbis Devar, there's an Isser Ribbis, even with words. The borrowers may not even say something to the lender that'll benefit him. So how so low low? You should not say to him, Da ki ba ish plodi b'mak. You should know that so and so is coming from such and such a place if the lender needs this information. Okay, and the last one for today, the Yud Aleph. Elu over below Sasa. These are the people involved in a deraisa in an deraisa of lending with Ribbis who transgress a lav, a negative commit, it says lo Sasa. Hamalvin, the lender, Halova, and the Barav, the Ha'arov, and the guarantor, the Adim, and the witnesses to the loan, the Chachamim Omen, and the Chachamim say, so even the scribe who writes the loan document, we call the loan processor today, they are all over a losase. Over in Mishumosita, and these people transgress the Issa Deraisa of your money you shall not give him for interest, and for increase you shall not give food. And because the Issa you shall not take for interest and increase. That's another pasuk. And the Issa you shall not act toward him as a harsh creditor. Mishum lo simon alav neshech, and the Isser you shall not place interest on him. And Mishum livne even lo siteh mechshel Yisrael belkacha ani Hashem, and the Isser, and before a blind person you shall not place a stumbling block, and you shall fear your God. I am Hashem. These are all the Isurim that are chal that the Isser of Ribbis is chal under, and it's a big problem. That's all for today. We will continue on Sunday, and by the end of next week, we'll be finishing by Metzia and starting by Basra. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Kol Tov.